The African Union has called for an immediate cessation of hostilities in Sudan after violent clashes broke out between the army and the Rapid Support Forces (RSF). The African Union Commission chairperson Moussa Faki Mahamat urged all parties involved, particularly the armed forces and the RSF, to stop the destruction, panic and bloodshed, while also calling on the international community to work together to bring the parties back to the negotiating table.
The conflict erupted early Saturday with gunfire and bombs heard near the army headquarters and presidential palace in Khartoum. The RSF accused the army of attacking its forces, but the military dismissed the allegations and declared the RSF a rebel group. Guinea-Bissau's president and chairman of the Economic Community of West African States Bloc, ECOWAS, Umaru Sissoko Embalo, and Kenya's president William Ruto have also called for an end to the hostilities in Sudan. The dispute between the two sides began when the army accused the RSF of making unauthorized moves, with their differences centering around a proposed transition to civilian rule. Sudan has been without a functioning government since the military dismissed Prime Minister Abdelrahim's transitional government and declared a state of emergency in October 2021. And joining us for this conversation, we have Dr. Majduline Tahir, an expert on Sudanese geopolitics and advocate for democracy and human rights. Thank you so much, Dr. Tahir, for joining us in this conversation.
Thank you.
So first of all, we would like you to provide an update on the current situation in Sudan. It started since Saturday. This is Monday. What is the current update with regards to the ongoing clashes between the army and the Rapid Support Forces (RSF), and how serious is the situation in Sudan?
Well, the situation between these fighting partners is worsening, with very heavy casualties along both sides from the military. We don't know, we don't have any statistics, but there are bodies of killed army officers from both sides, and then there is a situation whereby each one says that they are under control, but it's very clear that this battle is not over militarily between the two of them. And there is intense, almost non-stop fighting in the capital, Khartoum. So that is when it comes to the military. The next is the civilians. The civilian casualties, the numbers are increasing and the death toll is rising. The situations in hospital are next to impossible. All hospitals are suffering from lack of medication. The most urgent thing we need now is an immediate ceasefire. That we need the international community to exert maximum pressure on the fighting partners to allow for humanitarian corridors. People are dying. There is several complexities here, including a lot of dead bodies, both civilian and military, which cannot be buried, causing a huge environmental problem, and the consequences of that are just unthinkable and it's a disaster. It's a full-out humanitarian disaster in all capacities. Electricity and the power is off. Water shortages, extreme water shortages. Children are trapped in their houses. A lot of students, for example, just as one example, University of Khartoum, there are over 88 students who are trapped in a lab, and they can't leave, and they have been trapped there for 3 days without any water or without any food, without any supplies. Well, now the two parties said that there is going to be a period of ceasefire between 4 and 7 p.m. That was yesterday. But they did not uphold that one because there were people who were shot at that time. So even that is not upheld. The situation is very, very serious.
Now, Dr. Tahir, let's track back a bit for the sake of our viewers. Could you kindly explain the root causes of the power struggle within Sudan's military leadership that has led to this violence? What are the differing views of the two central figures, General Amdan Daglo, also known as Hemeti, and General Abdel Fattah el-Burhan in the power struggle over how Sudan should transition to civilian rule.
Sudan was ruled for 30 years, that is 89 to 2019, by the military juntas under the leadership of President Bashir. In 2004, there erupted a war by the military in Darfur. During that time, the forces called Janjaweed, which later took the name Rapid Response Forces, these were notorious militias that helped the government in massacring hundreds and thousands of civilians and raping and looting in Darfur. So the government kind of rewarded them by giving them a more legal status, and they were named the Rapid Response Forces, and they were moved in 2015 to Khartoum, the capital. Well, at that time, within the army itself, there were some very serious factions within the army itself, and the Islamists who controlled the army. At that time, President Bashir thought that this group, this paramilitary militia group, could assist him in keeping power, and they did until 2019, when his regime was toppled by popular movement. When his regime was toppled by popular movement, General Hemeti and the Rapid Response Forces saw it as a great opportunity to take over the country. But at the same time, there were the Islamists in the regular Sudanese army under the leadership of General Burhan, who also thought of getting the opportunity of getting their hands into the country. What happened that in the end they made a coalition, and under extreme pressure from the international community, the civilian partners agreed to have a kind of partnership in the name of keeping stability and of the Sudan and of the region. And that partnership went on until October 2021, when the military started a coup d'etat, whereby they removed the civilian partners and they had the power between the two of them. Now, here we are talking about two groups who are very power thirsty, driven only by cynicism, their very own personal interests, and most importantly, driven by powers from outside the country, regional powers in the name of United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, and Egypt, supporting one against the other. That went on until the international community, yet again, started a very serious pressure on the civilians to start a process of negotiation. That kind of negotiation started in I would say November 2021 until now, 3 days ago, and those negotiations collapsed. The two parties thought that each one of them thought that they are strong enough to go at each other, and they did, and they are holding 46 million people captives. And none of these two factions has anything to do with the aspirations of the people, or the people are not represented in this fight in any way.
Now, you've been in quite a dire situation in Sudan. We're seeing two power groups now. We're seeing the military and the rapid support forces all fighting for power. I want you to really explain what is going on in Sudan. Do we have them shooting at the civilians? How exactly are the civilians caught in the ceasefire? Because if it's between the two forces, why do we have deaths shooting at civilians? Tell us what exactly is occurring there.
This is a situation how it affects civilians. They are fighting among each other. The Sudanese army under Burhan has air force, but they are poorer on ground control and ground troops. So what happened is that in order to win the battle, the army is launching airstrikes on the rapid response forces points of their gatherings. And then at the same time, these points are within neighborhoods with, in fact, very, very populous areas in Sudan, and with a lot of people around. So what happens is that when the airstrike comes, of course, the civilian casualties are caught in the fire. This is from one part. The second part is that once one of them, that be the army, taken over the place of the other, the rapid response forces, then some soldiers start running. And these soldiers have weapons as well. So what they do is that they go into the neighborhood, they break into houses, and start threatening and terrorizing the people in those houses, stealing food and stealing money and so on and so forth. So so this is another way where civilians are affected. The third way, of course, is our hospitals, whereby the airstrikes and the fighting makes there is already very huge pressure on the health system. There's even more pressure on the health system, especially with casualties, and a huge number of casualties coming to the hospitals. The very fact that you can't bury the dead because you can't leave the house or you can't leave the hospital to bury the dead, that creates an impossible health situation, and people are staying in the houses now for the third day, many of them without water and food.
Quite a dire situation.
And the temperature, I must say, the temperature is above 38 degrees and almost 40 and 42
so it's very
degrees.
Hot.
It's very.
You also mentioned the fact that there's no electricity. Now, the situation is not pretty at all. And people are wondering, when will this end? Moussa Faki Mahamat, the chairperson of the African Union, did call on both parties to exercise restraint, and to get back to negotiations. What steps can the African Union do can they take, beg your pardon, to address the crisis in Sudan? And what can the international community do? Because over the weekend, we've seen series and dozens of condemnations. You're urging both parties, but these parties you're addressing are talking tough. The language that has been used by Hemeti and Abdelrahim are quite inflammatory, and they don't seem to be listening or reading any of the statements. And like you said, it's the 40 million plus ordinary Sudanese. They have nothing to do with this power tussle between these two factions that are suffering. So what can the international community do to support Sudan in its efforts to end this crisis and bring succor to the ordinary people of Sudan?
I'll give you a small example. For years and years and years, let's say just from 2019 until now, we have been calling on the international community repeatedly to have individual sanctions and travel bans on these two leaders because of their countless number of atrocities. This never happened, and the answer was because whenever we bring it up to the Security Council, Russia and China abstain. When the war in Ukraine happened, within hours, just a few hours, there was a number of Russian businesses and Russian businessmen who were sanctioned within hours. Individual sanctions against individuals, and travel bans against individuals. The United States and the international community, when they want to do something, they do it. And when they don't want to do something, they find several excuses for not doing it. And Sudan is the way it is. It suits the international community that at the very best, just to see what is happening, send in a number of condemnations and just words, but no actual deeds.
But what sort of action can they really take given the situation?
All the time, every single time, there are negotiations overseen by the international community. It was served to the Sudanese people on the basis that the auspices that it is here. It is very important that we compromise for the stability of the Sudan, and repeatedly we get less and less stability for the Sudan and for the region as well. So the claim that no accountability. For example, the question of accountability again was not in the question. People I see in your screen, Mr. Volker and the United Nations, they never speak about accountability. And with every time the juntas make one atrocity, the next negotiation, because they get away with it, they come with an even higher demand and more, and they get more and more powerful with every time. Like I tell you as an example, after what is happening now, because they are taking hostage 46 million, they will come with even more arrogant demands now than they did, for example, in 2019. Because with every time they're given more legitimacy, they are escaping any accountability, and hence it opens their appetite for more. It opens their appetite for more atrocities, and they receive even more recognition and backing down from the international community, and the international community pressures the civilians of the Sudan to accept this in the name of stability. Well, we lost both. We gained neither democracy nor stability.
So what is the hope for this democratic transition of, rather civilian transition of democracy now in Sudan? Is there any hope of it at the moment? Because at one side we're seeing the two power forces, and we also talk about the fact that even the deal for the transition was delayed 3 times in Sudan. Are there any looks inside for all of this? Because it seems like for Sudan to even get its democracy, the two sides have to come together and agree. But yet Sudanese people are saying that you don't want the military in the negotiation talks for democracy.
What happens is that we have retreated so much that at the very moment, the main thing is not the return to democracy, not the return of, it is ceasefire and saving civilians. This is the very first and most important immediate demand of the people of the Sudan, to put maximum pressure so that they stop. After that, it is a joke to try again to sit down with these juntas, try and talk about democracy. I mean, what kind of democracy? We might as well just talk about how they rule and in a dictatorship and train the Sudanese people to accept it. But calling it transition to democracy and so on is just ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Even the negotiating partners, they themselves, they see the cynicism and the contradiction of people who make this kind of atrocities. And you're talking about transition to democracy and so on. We're not talking about that. We are not talking, and you can't talk about that without accountability, without the rule of law. General Hemeti does not even have a primary school, proper primary school education, let alone a proper military school education. So there is no. I
mean, there are a lot of things, Dr. Tahir, from what you're saying about what we are wanting for Sudan is a cessation of hostilities in Sudan and bringing peace to the people, because a lot of people have died as a result of this power struggle between the military and the rapid support forces. Thank you so much, Dr. Majduline El Tahir, for joining us in this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.